Good morning, everybody, and welcome. On behalf of both Neil and Neil, welcome. Someone who walked in said Neil and Neil have done a deal. So, anyway, we have split the presentation. Obviously, you've seen the announcements. I think it's another very smart deal. Certainly for Sibanye, I think it's mutually smart for DRD, and certainly we are starting to I think set a very nice track record of transactions that are smart, and this is just another one. I will certainly highlight that the Sibanye side of this presentation has forward-looking statements. I'm sure Neil, as a good lawyer, will do the same when he gets up and talk, but there's the safe harbor statement. As I said, we would jointly do the presentation. I'll obviously cover it from a Sibanye perspective. Neil will cover it from a DRD perspective. I'll conclude, and then we'll have Q&A. There is a webcast, so we will take questions from those that are not here as well. In terms of the transaction overview, I don't want to go into all the detail, but essentially we are vending selected West Rand tailings retreatment project assets into DRD for a 38% stake, which at the share price of yesterday is worth circa 1.3 billion. So from our point of view, that's realizing some initial value for this transaction up front. Sibanye is not a company that participates in projects or other companies as a minority stakeholder, and it was very important from day one to agree that there should be a mechanism for us getting to 50+1, and the transaction has a mechanism in that gets us to 50+1 should we choose to go that way. I think importantly, this is selected assets. It's not the entire West Rand tailings retreatment project assets. Essentially, there is a portion of gold assets that we retain related to the Cook and the Ezulwini plants, and some very significant uranium assets. There's clearly some uranium in the tailings dams that are part of the selected assets that will go to DRD. As you know, we remain quite bullish on uranium, and I think the recent move by Cameco, you are starting to see the impact of cutting back on supply. Very importantly, this is an investment into DRD, so part of the transaction is a commitment from DRD to develop the West Rand tailings project in phases, and that'll be covered in more detail in the presentation. As those of you that cover the company will know that there are certain plants treating rock dumps that come to the end of their lives from a treatment perspective. Clearly the plants are nowhere near the end of their lives. Those plants were always identified as the initial steps in the West Rand tailings retreatment project, and they form part of the selected asset base as well. There's a more detailed list of the selected assets, and we've got a map that follows it, but you can see it's essentially the Driefontein 3 and 5, Kloof 1, Ventus Post, North and South, and the Lebanon tailing storage facilities. There's one active tailing storage facility, Driefontein 4, which will remain active in the initial phase of the project. There are the two surface treatment plants, Driefontein 2 and 3, which form part of the package, and of course the pilot plant, which has been an important part of getting the West Rand tailings retreatment project to the point where it is now, with quite a high amount of definition. Also, we have secured the land for the regional tailings storage facility that forms part of the package, and the land around the centralized processing plant which is part of one of the future phases of the West Rand Tailings Retreatment Project. There are some active facilities that will be transferred once they are decommissioned, and you can see that's Driefontein 1 and 2, Kloof 2 and Leerdun. Just to be very clear, and the map will make it also clear, the Ezulwini plant, which is essentially a uranium plant it's a gold plant with some uranium processing capacity, does not form part of this. Neither do the dams associated with the Ezulwini treatment facility, and nor does the Cook gold plant and some of the tailings projects around there feature in the transaction now. Clearly, as part of the bigger picture, this is really going to be one project, and the contract has mechanisms for including them at a later stage. There's the map. As you can see, if you work from left to right, you've got the two Driefontein plants, which will form the first phase. With the dams in that area, you've got the historical dams around Kloof and Leerdun. You can see the grouping of assets on the southern side of that diagram, really the Cook North and Cook South dams, which really is the Ezulwini, let's say, center of operation. And then on the northern side, you've got Millsite and the Cook assets, which do not form part of the transaction, I should say. All right, so what is the transaction rationale? I think without changing the emphasis, this is an investment in DRD and a future tailings company that I think is going to have a very exciting growth trajectory. But certainly, I think from a value perspective, we realize 1.3 billion of value immediately, which is only a portion of the total value of the West Rand Tailings Retreatment Project. Importantly, and as we've said, we would find another way to extract value out of this project. We get no value for it in our valuations. So certainly realizing some value up front is important, but of course that's not the end game. The end game is exactly what is written there, and that's to see the development of the project in a number of phases, not too dissimilar to the way we planned it, but of course that'll be up to DRD to bring it to fruition. Importantly, Sibanye has a strategy which we would like to pursue. It is a strategy that involves larger transactions like this, so it's important that we don't have projects that dilute us, such as a project like this, and therefore the DRD vehicle will provide a basis for raising capital without directly diluting Sibanye shareholders. As I've said, we're bullish on uranium, and it's just a matter of time as to when that value can be realized. But we retain full exposure to the uranium-rich Cook Dam, which is the key uranium asset, of course, coupled with the Ezulwini uranium processing facility. So the transaction was structured so that we retain that exposure. As I've said, this is definitely not the end game. We are not selling the West Rand Tailings Retreatment Project to exit it. This is about establishing a relationship with a separately listed vehicle and pursuing not only growth in South Africa, but potentially, and at the right time, growth into other commodities, into other regions around the world. I think Neil will say it much better than I will, but there's a unique set of skills here that if you couple it with our international experience and support that we get in the international markets, the sky is the limit for this. It is very consistent with our purpose, which is about our mining improves lives. It's consistent with our vision about creating superior value for all our stakeholders. And you can see in that regard we are partnering with a proudly South African company as well. We consider ourselves proudly South African, and we will fly the flag. The environmental impacts are numerous. We've always said that the rehabilitation of these facilities, especially where they're positioned on dolomitic areas, is important, and we have a duty to deal with these historical legacies, which is exactly what these projects do. It will release land. One of the initiatives that Sibanye is focused on involves establishing agricultural hubs, and certainly releasing land that was previously very productive from an agricultural point of view is an important part of the project in the long run. Using impacted mine water to facilitate all this is of course important, and an obvious environmental benefit. I think the bottom line is that this will have long-term benefits for both the regional and the national fiscus. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Neil to pick up on the DRD aspects.
Thank you very much, Neil. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for taking the time to come and listen to one of the more exciting stories that I've had the privilege of sharing with the market. It is indeed a very, very big day for our company. I think if you look at DRD today and you compare it to our asset portfolio 10, 12 years ago, you'll see that there's only one asset that is still in exactly the same state that it was 10 years ago, that we've retained through our restructuring and our evolution over the last few years, and that is the old Knights plant. But essentially, the DRD of old has been replaced by the new Ergo plant, and just reflecting on how that came about, discussions with a very peculiar Australian 10, 11 years ago, after they'd secured the Ergo plant from AngloGold Ashanti, and all we had here back in South Africa, with DRD focusing with much determination on Papua New Guinea and Fiji, were 180 million tons of ERP material, and vending that into a joint venture. I think the total deal value of 80 million at the time, a 5-page contract with very few of the regulations that we are now being subjected to, Kevin, and how that has evolved and been developed by the team to a point where the market believes that that asset is worth more than 2.2 billion rand. And we could use part of that asset, 38% of ownership units, to acquire this asset. It's very pleasing, I think, for the entire DRDGOLD team. So a very, very big day for us, and thank you for the opportunity of sharing the stage with you here today, Neil. Over time, it's become necessary for us to develop a skill set and to develop processes and procedures, protocols, to enable us to treat stuff that other people have thrown away at a rate and in a manner which makes it worthwhile, not just to our shareholders, but to the rest of our stakeholders, and to be able to do it sustainably. So the first point that's made there of the unrivaled network of service assets, that is indeed correct. But underscoring that and supporting that is a skill set that's developed over time, management protocols that's developed over time, a culture and a value system that's developed over time, that's enabled us to take these assets and turn them to account. So this company that really should have closed 10 years ago now provides ongoing employment for 2,000 people. We introduce 2.5 billion rand of revenue into the South African economy every year on an ongoing basis. Assuming that there's a multiple of 10, that's 25 billion rands worth of economic activity of real original money. This is not something that was imagined by a printing press somewhere or a government official. This is dust that's been turned into gold, that's been turned into money flowing into South Africa. And I don't think one can underestimate the contribution that makes, albeit at a much smaller scale than what you are used to or accustomed to. You accumulate those, and it does stay significant. So we aim to produce just more than a ton of gold every quarter, and we achieved that in the last year, which was an interesting year, very challenging year. It was the year when we migrated our center of gravity from center of Johannesburg, or central Johannesburg, central and south, further towards the east. A lot of cleanup work that took place, and that ate into our cash balance. But we managed to do that without having to depart from a very important and fundamental principle in our approach, our focus on cash flows and rewarding our shareholders by way of a dividend at the end of that financial year for holding on to our shares. So a year ago, 2016 financial year, depending on which month to which month you were to assess it, DRDGOLD's dividend yield was the second highest on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. Obviously this year it's not going to be like that, and that's been our approach. If there's free cash, it gets distributed. If not, then we see what we could do. But we want to maintain that dividend flow run rate that we've been building up over the last decade. You will see if you read through our integrated report that the idea or the concept of sustainable development is the golden thread that informs our strategy, that informs the deployment of capital and the deployment of resources. This is something that we take very, very seriously. It's not always recognized, especially by institutions that need money, controversial money, to sustain themselves, like some of the NGOs in South Africa that essentially turn into lifestyle NGOs. We don't focus on that. We focus on our value system and where that takes us. And sustainable development, being serious about the environmental impacts of our activities, being serious about improving the quality of life of people in and around Johannesburg, that informs our strategy. So the 42 million that was spent on environmental rehabilitation, by and large, had to do with dust suppression and cleaning up the Johannesburg landscape, which is probably the one bad legacy of mining in Johannesburg if you were to assess all of its legacies. We have a very significant mineral resource. It's neatly stockpiled on surface, and we've developed the technologies to access it, and access it at the required rate and into infrastructure that's been designed to optimally exploit the bit of value that's remained behind after it was discarded. And there's a nice ring to it. DRDGOLD, established in 1895, one of the first miners in the Johannesburg area, the oldest listing on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, the first to do primary mining by mining hard rock from underground, and now mining that mineral resource again by taking the stockpiled tailings and putting that through a process to generate value. So for us to be able to take that accumulated wealth of experience, of intellectual property systems, protocols, of values, and be able to deploy that in collaboration with Sibanye is really a very pleasing thought, very pleasing idea. And we're very privileged to be able to do that. If you're a cricketer, you want to play cricket at the Oval. If you're an opera singer, you want at least once sing in the Vienna Opera House. If you're a mud pumper, then this is the resource that you want to mine. Put it right up on that level, especially the Driefontein 3 and 5 dams. And the beauty of this combination of assets, the synergy, if you were to plan them properly, if you were to access them in the right sequence, if you have long-term sustainability as your vision, as your approach, it's a lovely asset that can continue to bring value to South Africa and its people on a much bigger scale than we've managed to achieve over the last few years. So we're essentially doubling the size of the company. It is a combination of assets, infrastructure and assets, that enable us to take this in bite-sized chunks, to approach this project in bite-sized chunks. So we've run various models, and it's not the sort of asset that by acquiring it, I have to get at least 2 billion rand in capital before you can take the next step. The assets and the quality of assets which are following this transaction is such that we can get into early stage cash flows while we go through the volume of work, the mountain of work that's been done by the Sibanye team and their predecessors, of assessing the ore body, looking at what the optimal blend is, looking what the ideal engineering design looks like, and start planning that second phase whilst generating sufficient cash flows to sustain all of that and to keep the people that are working in this organization at this point in time in employment and also give them a future going forward. It does offer the potential to increase revenues, cash flows. It's certainly going to very significantly dilute our unit costs. It's a very good ore body. It's of a much higher grade than what we're currently mining. I think if we get it right, if we do everything that we want to do properly and at the right time, and we take full advantage of this ore body, then we will add about 43 tons of gold production over the next 15, 20 odd years to the existing 40 tons of production that we're envisaging coming out of Ergo. But at a very attractive margin. Our intention, our objective is to take exposure to the gold prices as long as we possibly can. And just the amount of gold that you require in order to cover the overhead and what's left in this ore body compared to what we have is very attractive, and it gives exceptionally good gearing to the market, to movements in the gold price. Something that we're very pleased about, and I remember joining DRD many, many years ago, and some of my older colleagues saying to me, the 5 things that you require in order to successfully put together or set up a tailings retreatment business. And he started off by saying a big enough tailings dam. There are a whole host of it. You need a decent ore body, decently sized, right grades, access routes, water, power, big enough plant. But the big catalyst, the one thing without which you just don't have a business, is a big enough tailings facility. And getting access to this, something that's been negotiated, that's been approved, that's been consented to by the regulator, the land that's been secured, that is a massive game changer insofar as accessing this ore body and potentially consolidating that region is concerned. It does give this project a very significant competitive advantage. Obviously, I think being in a different, hopefully on a different level, scale-wise, size-wise, being associated with the company that has a proven track record established over a very short period of time of making good deals, doing good deals, and successfully implementing it, that might give us quite a bit of credibility as well, some traction insofar as future growth is concerned. We had many doors closed in our face because we are perceived to be a tiny company. And we're very grateful that Sibanye did not do that, that when these forces started coming together at neither my initiative nor yours, Neil, I think it was maybe an external initiative, which we should thank somebody for. We're very pleased that the door wasn't closed in our face, that we were given the opportunity to look at the merits of this transaction, given the opportunity to develop the transaction and now to conclude it, and establish ourselves as a serious player in this field. So it does position us strategically for future growth. And we're hungry for that future growth because we do believe that we deliver on all 5 capitals that underscore the whole idea of sustainable development. Although the company is a robust company, DRDGOLD is a robust company, resilient through its people, through its asset base, through the manner in which we've arranged it, there is still that perception of single asset risk. And I think this very significantly addresses that perception. And it may open up the opportunity for a number of investors that previously were not allowed in terms of their portfolio mandate to take exposure to this asset to maybe take a second look at it. I think I've spoken about the other 2 points, but I do want to maybe just pause on the introduction of Sibanye-Stillwater as a substantial and supportive shareholder. We are very pleased about that. And yes, Neil did say that when he does deals, then it's important that they retain measure of control. I think if we deal with this the way that we've been dealing with our assets, taking our custodianship of our shareholders' capital very seriously, dealing with their assets responsibly, we'll be rewarded for that. But at the same time also, if these were my dumps, I'd also want to keep 51% of them. I wouldn't just allow people to play with them and maybe deal with them irresponsibly and not have something to say about it. So we're entirely comfortable with the idea of the option and the 50+1. So how are we going to be doing this? Well, the plan is, if we're given the opportunity to do that, to start with the refurbishment, not really the refurbishment, more the adjustment. These plants are in very good condition. But the adjustments of the infrastructure to start receiving slimes at the rate that's required. So there'll be a few pump stations, a few slurry lines. There's an existing tailings deposition facility onto which we can deposit the initial production. That will be from the DP 5 dam, number 5 dam. We'll start with about 400,000 tons and see if we can up that to roughly 600,000 tons per month. And that should give us enough cash flow, leverage to do all the other stuff that we need to do over the next 24 months, or 24 months from the inception of the transaction, to verify the studies that have been done and to, again, just make sure that we're happy with the configuration of the infrastructure that is required, the engineering infrastructure that's required to go for the bigger phase. Ultimately, the objective is, as I said earlier, to mine the entire resource. Gold content in these dumps is not consistent. Some of these dumps have higher grades and some have slightly lower grades. Our objective is to make sure that we introduce almost a flat, smooth head grade into ultimately the larger plant over the entire life of mine. It's easy to attack this thing, to mine the eyes out to high grade, but then you'll be destroying a lot of value. It's a fallback situation, but it's certainly a very distant one. We are very determined to mine the entire ore body, to take exposure to the gold price through this asset for the next 15, 20 years, and make sure that we introduce the optimal blend at the optimal rate through a plant that is bespoke and designed to the required specifications to do what we need to do in order to give value to our shareholders and to not leave anything on the table. So the expected timeline obviously is today, the announcement, and then our circular to shareholders in accordance with the requirements. It's going to be tight because we're going into December, and I think many of these institutions are closed for a period of time. But we've set up our resources to give it a go, full-on go. It's the conditions precedent that need to be met during the course of next year. Shareholder meetings, hopefully, to give us approval for the transaction, and then closing, all over the next few months into 2018. So that's our story. Once again, thank you very much for the opportunity, Neil, and I hand the podium back to you.
Thank you, Neil. All right, so just very briefly then to conclude, it's clearly, as I said right at the beginning, a smart transaction. We think another smart transaction, and mutually beneficial to both parties and companies, including all stakeholders. As I said, it allows us to realize immediate value for a portion of this project. You heard from Neil how it allows them to actually start the process or the first phase of the project. Clearly, having a very substantial interest now in DRD, we do want to see them prosper. So with that immediate growth profile, a very substantial increase in reserves and resources is obviously beneficial. Again, I want to make the point that this is an investment. This is not us selling an asset. We think these skills really have a place on the international stage and perhaps even in other commodities. And certainly we would like to influence Neil and his team to start looking at things like that. The potential internationally for that is huge, and we're thinking much more about that than about running DRD in terms of the specific project. So in my mind, again, a very smart combination of reasons for both parties to have done this. So with that, let's move to questions and answers. And James, maybe you can facilitate that, and Neil and I can answer the questions. Thank you.
Thanks, gents. I think we'll start with questions from the floor. If you don't mind, just when you... there'll be a roving mic coming around now. And just give your name and the institution you represent, if you don't mind. And who the question is directed to. And rather use surnames rather than the first name.
Hi, good morning. It's Darren Marder from HSBC. This one goes to Neil Frenneman. Neil, just a couple of questions in terms of the deleveraging of the balance sheets and how this transaction could potentially impact that. I just note that the 38%, would you be required to make an offer to minorities under the JSE rules, or would you seek to have them waive that? And if they didn't waive that right, how would that impact your assessment of this transaction? And then just in terms of getting a sense for the value realized through this transaction, can you give us an indication of what your carrying value for the assets are?
All right. The carrying value, perhaps, Charles, you can give that some thought. But the waiver, certainly this is not intended to make a follow-on offer to minorities. So we're seeking shareholder approval to waive that. That's an inherent part of the transaction, and that's something that they'll have to vote on. That's we've obviously got TRP approval for that. So no, that is not going to happen. The same with the follow-on acquisition. We've got 2 years to do it. So it's something we will watch. Clearly, we are very mindful of our leverage position, but in 2 years' time, we could look very different.
So, Darren, in terms of the carrying value of these assets, and this includes land, infrastructure, all of that, it's about 350 to 400 million rand.
Thanks very much. And Neil, sorry, just to confirm with the answer on the offer to minorities, if they didn't waive that right, would you still seek to pursue the transaction, or would that be seen as something that would maybe result in a delay?
No, we would not pursue the transaction. That right has to be waived.
Thanks. Good morning. It's Patrick Mann from Deutsche Bank. 2 questions, I think probably for both Neils. Firstly, in terms of phase 2, looking at a central processing plant and 1 million tons per month, are you envisaging that DRD would need a capital injection for that sort of level or scale? And would you be looking at kind of project financing, or how would that come about if so? And then just secondly, you said the contract allows for the putting in of the Cook and Ezulwini tailings facilities later on. Could you maybe just give us an idea of, would that be only as part of phase 2? Does that depend on the uranium price? Just how are you thinking about that, and when would those particular resources come into play? Thanks.
So let me answer the second part first, Neil, and then you do the first part, because that's really a DRD issue. Just to be clear, what I said was that the contract caters for the treatment of uranium out of the Ezulwini facility. It doesn't cater for us vending those in. That's not, just to be clear, that's not what I was implying or suggesting. If we were to pursue the uranium treatment option on our own, we would obviously have to make a capital contribution and a cost contribution to depositing those tailings on the centralized tailings facility. So that's what, and that's contractually embodied within the contract. So it's not the vending in of any of those other assets. That's a completely separate discussion, which may or may not happen somewhere in the future.
On the funding side, I think at the end of this 24-month period of just looking at the design and the execution of that project, we've run a number of models in terms of which there is some equity raising as well as debt. Personally, my preference would be to limit the dilution of shareholders at the time. So we want to see what cash flows look like and what sort of debt we can access. But I'm also very much opposed to hedging, because we do believe that the value in this project lies in taking exposure to the gold price, and you don't want to lock that in. You don't want to lock in that value at your own cost. So we're looking at a relatively flexible model at this stage, but with those two important considerations in mind.
Leon?
Thanks. Leon Esterhuizen, Nedbank. Just, I know it's early days, but you must have done some calcs in terms of the capital requirement, even just for phase one, which you say is low capital. Can you maybe just give us an indication of what you think that level might be?
We don't envisage spending more than 200 million to get it up and running into phase one.
Rand.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, my world is a rand world, Leon. It's not a dollar world. And then insofar as the bigger infrastructure is concerned, it's difficult to say at this stage, but it would be at least 2 billion rand. And that includes the tailings facility. The tailings facility is the big expenditure. Also depends on the design of that tailings facility. If it requires a liner, that pushes up the price quite a bit. If it doesn't require a liner, then it doesn't. So it can be on either side of 2 billion rand.
Thanks.
Shall we just check on the lines if there are any questions on chorus call? Nothing.
If I could maybe just, James,
Sure.
and follow up to what Leon is saying. We have spent the better part of 1.3 billion in capital infrastructure in DRD without having to go to the markets over the last few years, with an ore body that is not at the same level as this one. So we're confident that the project, current gold level, price levels and higher, comfortably support the capex for the larger project.
Darren?
Thanks. Just a quick follow-up to Neil Pretorius. Could you give us an indication in terms of production that you're expecting, that you're planning from phase one, and what type of margin you're targeting there as well?
It's early days, Aaron. Yeah, what I've learned with tailings deposition, with tailings retreatment, is that you know how much you're going to produce when the gold's on the table. So we have a model, but to create expectations in the market at this stage, I think would be irresponsible. We're comfortable, though, that the model is supportive of our strategic plan.
Thanks very much.
Just one more, Martin on the floor, and then we'll go to the calls.
Martin Creamer from Mining Weekly Online, and this is to Neil and Neil. I'd just like to find out what is going to happen to the uranium content of the Driefontein dumps that do have uranium. What happens to that when you extract the gold? And also, can I have a word on the difference in the richness of the Driefontein versus the Ergo plant? What is it, the grade difference in the two?
Should I go?
Like you
Certainly,
should
yes.
deal with us.
Martin, we won't be extracting uranium initially, and I think because we're a gold producer, what we find is that in order to optimize gold production, or if you were to produce both products, there's going to be sacrifice on either side, depending on where your priorities are. So we're in this for, obviously, the gold, but if there's some technology that's developed in terms of which uranium could be treated from the tail, the gold tail, or where it could be treated and the uranium tail does not impact on the gold extraction efficiencies, we'd be looking at that. But the initial objective is to go for gold. So the uranium will stay in the tail, and whether that would be accessible at some point or another, it's difficult to say. Our current footprint that we're mining at Ergo The Withok tailings dam was treated and then retreated when it became feasible to go for both those products. So it's a possibility into the future, but it's not part of our immediate plans. Insofar as your second question is concerned, the difference in grade, the average here, I believe, is about 0.344, if I'm not mistaken, which is, how much is that? 25-30% higher than the longer-term resource that we have, our longer-term reserve at Ergo.
Leon?
Can I slip in one more?
Yeah, sure.
Just a quick one again on, if I understand it correctly, the phase 1, you will be picking up those existing surface retreatment plants as part of the DRD bundle.
Correct, yes.
So you'll be getting those cash flows when the deal closes. How long after that do you perceive that expansion to be kicking in? Yeah.
You talk about the
phase 1
the
expansion
upgrading?
of the upgrade of the plants to 500,000-600,000.
Yes, the hard rock upside remains with Sibanye, and it's been extended and could be extended depending on the availability of material for, I suppose, as long as we choose. But we want to get the slimes in sooner rather than later. There are certain restrictions on implementing the transaction. Most notably, obviously we need to get shareholder approval, but also Competition Commission approval. But once we've gone through those conditions, we would want to start with the refurbishment and the construction of infrastructure, and initially to get to 400,000 tons of slimes.
Okay, so the hard rock stays with Sibanye.
The upside, we'll be treating it, but the upside for a period of time into the implementation stays with Sibanye, and then there's a cut-off date, depending on when some of these CPs are complied or delivered into, and then we may want to extend hard rock coupled with slime, or we may want to terminate the hard rock.
Okay, thanks.
This is what works, Leon. We'll add the numbers. There's not going to be any sort of any issues other than does it make money or does it not make money.
Yeah, but I guess the question really is, where's the upside for DRD, and how quickly does that come in?
As soon as the slimes start
So it's
coming
only when
through.
the slime's coming through?
Yes, when the slime's coming through, and if we decide to extend hard rock, if it's available, there would be some upside associated with that as well.
Thanks.
Martin?
And looking along, you talk about international opportunities in other commodities, perhaps. What would those commodities be, and why do you say there's so much of this around the world? Has nobody been doing what should be done with it?
Yeah, look, I say it based on many approaches we've had to become involved in smaller projects, which clearly don't make sense in a bigger vehicle. It's also not a skill set that we purport to have. I think we could do it, but clearly having a vehicle where it would make a material difference, where you have the skill sets, is just a very logical extension of growing outside of South Africa. And I think our international experience and support base is very useful in that regard. I think Sibanye's already broken the mold of just being a gold company. We know how to do that, and there are clearly some very exciting new minerals. Well, they're not new; they've always been there. But I think there's changes in technology that are making getting into other minerals very exciting. So that is much longer term thinking. It's clearly something we'd be quite excited to support Neil and his team doing at the right time. It's clearly some blue sky upside.
I believe we've got a question on the call line.
Yes, the first question is from Richard Hatch of RBC. Please go ahead, Richard.
Thanks. First question is for both Neils. You've talked to some of the conditions of the transaction closing. Can you just talk around your thoughts around the regulatory approvals and if you see any issues there? And secondly, for Neil Froneman, Neil, you've made some adjustments to the gold portfolio, placing some assets on care and maintenance. If you have to do that again, depending on a changing environment within South Africa. Is there anything within this deal that makes it more difficult for you to temporarily close assets and then bring them back online? Are you hamstrung in any way, or can you just act as you see fit? Thanks.
Yeah, hi Richard. No, I don't think that there's anything that compromises our flexibility in terms of this transaction and any other assets in the portfolio. I think we've managed to structure this in a way that is very flexible. I think I just want to make the point, it's an associated point, that we are not asset huggers. We will also not run loss-making assets and cross-subsidize them, even if the company is in a position to do that. That's just not good business. In terms of your first part of the question, regulatory approvals, it's the ones that are listed in the announcement, which is really shareholder approvals, Competition Commission approvals. We don't believe there's any other regulatory approvals required for the transaction. It's relatively simple.
Okay, thanks. And sorry, just one last follow-up. Is there a break fee on this or not? I don't know if I've missed it in the terms of the release.
There's no break fee.
Cool. Thanks.
I believe there's another question on the call.
There's a question from Emma Townsend of HSBC.
Hi, good morning. Just a question in terms of Western Limb tailings and Platinum Mile in your platinum portfolio, in terms of the potential for DRD to get involved in the tailings there, or are those still ring fenced in either division?
Yeah, hi Emma. Certainly there is the scope for a much bigger portfolio, especially where you already have a listed vehicle. But, those are, let's say, very initial and conceptual discussions that Neil and I have had. That's not the primary focus. Those are the sort of things we can discuss downstream. Excuse the pun.
No, that's perfect. Thanks very much.
We've just got one on the webcast from Rene Hochreiter, Noah Capital. Question is, what are the grades and tonnages on the Driefontein 3 and 5 dams? I've got that, Rene, in the appendix at the back of the presentation. You'll see a breakdown of the grades for all of the assets. And you're looking at about 78.8 million tons, average grade about 0.47 grams a ton. So that'll give you an idea. It's just over 1.2 million ounces, I believe. Any more questions from the floor? Patrick?
Hi. Yeah, just to follow up on Martin's question, actually. Maybe just some clarity on what you meant about some smaller opportunities which came to Sibanye-Stillwater that could rather be pursued within DRD. Are you looking to keep, leverage DRD's experience and kind of intellectual capital, particularly on surface and tailings retreatments, or is it, Sibanye's multi-commodity value approach where, any project can fall within that, or is it specifically going to remain tailings retreatment? Thanks.
Just my view, and of course this is something that the DRDGOLD board would have to make a call on, but I envisaged it just on tailings.
Thank you.
I mean, we don't want to use this project to learn. We want to use this project to deploy, to implement.
I think that's about all from the floor and certainly from the call line. So thank you very much for attending. We're around if you want to have any follow-up questions. There's some eats outside, so please join us for a drink and a bite to eat. Thank you.